Good morning. Very warm welcome to you for today's webinar. So we're going to be giving you an introduction to something called DMARC from Sendmarc. For those joining us live, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Really appreciate it. Great to have you with us. If you need to step away or want to revisit anything discussed today, then this session is being recorded. So we're going to share a copy with you all so you can watch it back at your convenience. To introduce myself, I'm 𝗪𝗺𝗪𝗁. I'm director here at Kuiper. I'm delighted to be hosting this session alongside some fantastic guest speakers, which you can see on screen now. Joining us today, we've got 𝗪𝗵𝘆 𝗪𝗁, who's the Senior Product Specialist from our cybersecurity distributor, Brigantia. Elliott's going to be walking you through the fundamentals of DMARC and why Sendmarc is such a compelling solution for those looking to protect their email domains. Kerry Tompkinson, Senior Account Exec from Sendmarc. Kerry actually works closely with both Kuiper and our customers throughout their journey with Sendmarc. She's going to bring valuable insights into real-world deployment and support. And our very own Ryan Williams, our Head of Solutions at Kuiper. Some of you may know Ryan already and had the pleasure of working with him. So Ryan leads the technical team here at Kuiper and is responsible for consulting, deploying, and also managing DMARC for our clients. So today, it's all about understanding something called DMARC. The aim of it is to make you aware of the risks that exist right now that could seriously harm your business and what you can do to mitigate or eliminate the risk. We also want to update you on the stance that the likes of Yahoo, Google, and now Microsoft are taking regarding the sending of emails from your business. If at any point during the session you've got a question, there is a Q&A, so please pop it in the Q&A box. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. At the end, in about 30-35 minutes or so, we'll answer as many questions as we possibly can. So with that brief introduction covered, we'll dive right in. I'll hand over to Elliot, who's going to take you through the fundamentals of Sendmarc's DMARC solution, what it is, why it matters, and what action you need to take. So over to you, Elliot.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So before we kind of jump into the DMARC conversation, I'm first going to just be talking a little bit around sort of the general problem that we're seeing with email at the moment. Now, we've got that big figure at the top there of 91% of cybercrimes are initiated via email. And when you start to think about it, actually, that maybe isn't quite so surprising, because if we think about it, what is the most common form of communication that you have with your clients, with your suppliers, and really the rest of the world? You think about it, and actually, it's going to be via email. And threat actors or hackers or whatever it is that you want to call them, they're well aware of that. They are 100% conscious that this communication method, sending emails, is how you are going to be communicating most with your clients and suppliers. And they want to try and get into those email systems in order to make sure that they then start stealing money or get access to your company systems beyond just email. And that's why they wanted to go down the email route rather than, say, kind of trying to call you up and try and get access through there. Or sometimes you'll occasionally get like maybe a text message or a WhatsApp message or something through there. But really, email is the most common form by some margin of attack route for a threat actor. But I also want to cover off those 4 key areas that we see on the page right now, which starts off with impersonation, which is, and really what's happening with impersonation attacks is when you've got somebody who is sending an email on behalf of your email address, but it's not coming from you. Now, this is actually, you can have legitimate impersonation examples where you've got some marketing emails that are coming out from your email address, or maybe you've got invoices coming out from your email address from certain tools that help to, that will be sending out emails, but it's not necessarily coming from, say, your Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace account. This is coming from tools like MailChimp or HubSpot for marketing, or tools like Sage for your accountancy tools. And those kind of legitimate ways of being able to impersonate emails is an area that threat actors and hackers are really interested in kind of exploiting, basically. Because it's worth remembering that anybody can send any email or send an email from any email address, regardless of what the service is behind it. They can send that email out. And that's just because of the way of how email works. Email has been around for 40, 50 years or something, and it was always designed to just be a communication tool. There was never any sort of insight or any sort of thinking around the fact that somebody could weaponize it for their own malicious gain. And this is really where we want to be focusing on in terms of protecting against those impersonation attacks. And we'll jump into that in a little bit more later on in today's session. The other side of it is the interception of emails. So when an email gets sent from point A to be sent to point B, it doesn't just magically appear in the recipient's inbox. That email has to go through a transit process, and threat actors can sometimes sit in the middle, and they can then monitor to see what these emails are. And they tend to sit there quite quietly. They're not doing anything with those emails until they find an email that seems to be of high value, usually something like a change of bank details notice. So you could be sending an email to your customers saying, we've changed our bank details and we need you to pay this bank account instead. But if somebody is sat in the middle, they could see that email, change the bank details so it goes back to the threat actor rather than yourselves, so that when the final recipient actually gets that email, they'll then start paying the wrong bank account. Even if they picked up the phone to you and said, hey, we've received this email from you. Are you definitely changing your bank details? Because we want to make sure. And you just turn around and go, yes, we are. And then they're going, great, thanks so much for confirming, putting the phone down. They haven't actually confirmed if the bank details are incorrect. So really, we need to also validate that process as well and protect against any scenario where somebody could be intercepting those emails. Now, moving away from this cybersecurity conversation, we're also talking about email deliverability today. Now, I'm sure plenty of people on today's session or who are watching this recording down the line have had problems with emails not landing in the inbox of the intended recipient. Quite often, we're finding that emails either end up in the junk folder or are just straight up being bounced. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to why that's actually happening. So again, we'll be talking a bit around today and how we can improve email deliverability utilizing that functionality, that security protocol, DMARC, and I'll explain more on that later on. And the final piece is we've got a lack of visibility on our outbound emails. When you click that send button, you do not know what happens to that email after it leaves your environment, after it leaves your Microsoft 365, or it leaves your Google Workspace, or your MailChimp, or HubSpot, or Sage. Now, what happens to that email once it leaves? And really, we want to get that visibility back. At the end of the day, that email is coming from our domain. And as domain owners, we want to understand what's happening, what goes on with that email once it leaves our environment, so we can have a bit more control over that process. So we've got an impersonation example here at the front. We can see that this is an email that's being received from one ronald.mcdonald@mcdonalds.com, and he's sending an email to me saying, hey, Elliot, please see this following invoice attached. I'm traveling at the moment, so please can you pay this urgently? Now, if I receive this email, one of the first things that I tend to do as someone who works in the cybersecurity space is I look to see if that email address is what I'm expecting to see. If someone's demanding payment, I need to make sure that this is legitimately coming from somebody that I recognize. And maybe I do genuinely speak to Ronald McDonald on a regular basis, and I'd be thinking, yeah, that's his email address. I can trust this email and I'll pay this invoice. The problem being, of course, that actually someone has impersonated his email and I've just sent thousands of pounds into the wrong bank account. And that's detrimental to me as a business, but also to McDonald's to a certain degree, because now I'm thinking, hold on a minute, McDonald's have just been, I've had a malicious email from McDonald's. Surely they've been compromised. What's going on? And maybe I don't want to work with McDonald's any longer. So it's about making sure that we keep that reputation as well. And that kind of feeds us quite well into the general damage that could happen if you think about it from your own domain perspective. What would be the impact on your business if someone impersonated your email address or your director's email address or somebody with quite a high profile job title in your organization? So if we start thinking about things like deposit fraud, I've mentioned that earlier on, people paying money into the wrong bank account. This is something that can quite often happen, not just with an interception, but maybe someone impersonating your accounts team to send an email to your client saying you have an overdue invoice that you need to pay urgently, otherwise we'll take you to court or something like that. We've also then got ransomware distribution. So for those of us on the call, I believe most people understand what ransomware is, but for the benefit, if for anybody who doesn't know, ransomware is when a threat actor has managed to get access to your systems and they have locked down your files and your systems behind basically a paywall. You cannot get access to those files, your systems, and you'll need to pay them a ransom in order to then get access back to those systems. That ransom is usually paid via a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, because cryptocurrency can't really be tracked or traced back to the person who's being traded with that currency. But if we think about it from the perspective of, if, say, for example, Stuart sent everyone an email that's joined us today saying, thank you for joining today's webinar, here's a data sheet on what we've talked about, you're much more likely to be clicking on that. But what if somebody who's on today's webinar is going to impersonate Kuiper and is going to be sending a malicious attachment instead? That could much more easily distribute ransomware as a result. Now, Kuiper fully protected, that won't actually happen, but it's something that's worth thinking about if you're thinking about for your own domain and for your own clients. Also worth thinking about as well, just expanding on that, if your client has got ransomware, are they going to be in a position to pay your invoices? And not only that, but we see that, I think the statistic is somewhere like 50% of businesses who get ransomware will end up folding or go bankrupt within about a year of getting that ransomware. What that basically means is you could lose one of your customers because of an impersonation attack that comes from your domain. So yes, we need to be talking much more about what's happening beyond just a cybersecurity conversation, but actually the impact on you as a business from a financial perspective as well. We've also got identity theft. Now, this is kind of twofold, really. If someone is impersonating your email address, they're purporting themselves to be you, and that's not great. We don't want people to be stealing your identity and having that communication as if it's you. But on top of that, there could be other identity theft whereby you might have maybe an HR email address that is being impersonated by a threat actor. And that threat actor is sending an email into your organization saying, we're updating our details. Please, can you provide us with some information relating to your date of birth, your home address, the bank account you want your emails, your pay to be going into. And that might be just enough information for a threat actor to be able to take out credit agreements in your employees' names. And that is then obviously resulting in credit fraud. And we want to definitely go against that as much as possible. On top of that, we then also have reputational damage. If an impersonated email comes from your own domain and that goes to your clients, who are they going to be pointing their fingers at? Just think about that for a moment. You might not have been compromised. Your systems don't necessarily need to be compromised for this to happen. It is very much likely that this is coming from some random source that's from China or Russia or somewhere in South America. And actually, they can send it, as I mentioned from earlier on, they can send it from whatever they like. So we need to kind of have a bit of a different perspective on email security today, because quite often what we find is a lot of people on today's call will have Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace and maybe utilize the existing security controls that we have in place. Microsoft Defender obviously being one of them. Some of you on the call may be familiar with some of these brands that we see on the left-hand side, Proofpoint, Mimecast, Sophos, and those tools. And the idea around these tools is to protect your staff. They're there to protect your systems and your own internal environment. The problem being is threat actors are aware of that. They know that these tools are in place. So what they're wanting to do is change their focus and move away from focusing specifically on you, but they're now going to focus on your clients, they're going to focus on your suppliers and the rest of the world. And that is where Sendmarc then comes in. Oh, I've gone right to the very end there. So it's about getting Sendmarc involved and making sure that we understand a bit more around what this DMARC conversation is. So DMARC, what is it really doing? It's doing those 4 key pillars that I talked about earlier on. It's protecting against impersonation attacks that I've been talking about. It's protecting against emails being intercepted in transit. And it's also ensuring that emails can be delivered into the inbox of recipients and gives you visibility on those outbound emails. Unfortunately, for the next slide, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about other acronyms beyond just DMARC, and I'm afraid there's 2 others that we need to look at. SPF and DKIM. But don't worry, you don't need to necessarily remember those. That's Kuiper's job. But just for the context for today, I'll just run through at a very high level what it is that they do. SPF stands for Sender Policy Framework. And what it does is it essentially is like an invite list into a party. If you're on the invite list, you're allowed in. If you're not on the invite list, you're not allowed in. To bring it slightly more technical, it's basically a whitelist of services that you are using. So you can tell the world, I use Microsoft 365 to send emails from our kind of our Microsoft environment. We send emails from MailChimp and we send emails from Sage. And those tools we are telling the world that we are using so that they can trust an email coming from those tools. Great. We then also have DKIM. Now, I'm not going to go technical with DKIM at all. It stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail. And what it does is it acts like a wax seal on a letter. Now, there are two main purposes to a wax seal. The first one is the seal itself identifies who the sender was because it's a unique seal for the individual. And the other advantage of the seal is that if that letter is intercepted in transit from being sent from one person to the other, they would need to break that seal to then look at the contents of the letter and then edit the contents of that letter. And because of that, we want to then tell the recipient to not trust that letter. And DKIM is the modern day equivalent of that wax seal. Someone's putting a wax seal on the email that you're sending out. Now, that's great because it gives us now a security framework that we can work towards to ensure that we're protecting our domain. But the problem is that SPF and DKIM on their own actually does not give you control over what a recipient does with an email coming from you. What I really mean by this is if they receive an email from your own account, from your own email address, and it fails SPF. So this is it's not come from a source that's been whitelisted. It's not on the invite list to the party. And there's maybe no wax seal on the letter. Then what does that recipient do with that letter? Well, at the moment, the decision is up to them. They decide what they do with it. And truth be told, they just give it straight to the person that's going to. So they just go straight into the inbox of the recipient and their person will then read it and then be none the wiser as to the fact that this might be an attack. And this is where DMARC then comes in because it provides you as the domain owner that control and you can dictate to the recipient what should happen in the event that those two security policies that we see there, security procedures, SPF, DKIM, what it is that they should do in the event that both of those fail. So DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting and Conformance. Not expecting you to remember that. I'm just saying it purely from an education standpoint for today. But what DMARC does is one of three things depending on how it's being configured. Now, this looks a little bit technical, but don't worry, I'll explain this, but it's worth understanding because I've had a few conversations with some people in the past where they say that they do DMARC, but really, what does that actually mean? So the first stage that we've got is P equals none. And truthfully, at this stage, there is no protection. So what happens is an email is being sent from your domain to a recipient, and that recipient is then basically going, okay, I've got this email, what should I do with it? And you're saying, you can do what you like. You can deliver it, you can bounce it, you can do what you like. But what I want you to do is I want you to send a report back to me that tells me what happened to that letter after I had sent it. So it allows me to understand, has this email come from somewhere that we recognize? Is it on that SPF list? Is it whitelisted? Is it on the invite list? Has that letter or that email got a wax seal on it? And also, when did it get sent to you? And it's giving us an understanding around what's going on here. Really, what this allows us to do is ensure that the existing services that we use are all correctly configured. And if they are, then it means that we can start enforcing some security on our domain. And we can then move to P equals quarantine. Now, this tells the recipient in the event that this email does not have the wax seal and is not on the invite list, then I want you to put that email into the junk folder or the quarantine environment, because it's very highly likely that this email is coming from a threat actor. So in other words, do not trust it and flag it as spam. But if you think about it, if you think about maybe your own workload, I know especially with my own workload at the moment as well, I'm dealing with maybe 100, 150 emails a day, and I'm back to back on calls. So if I see that I've got emails going into my junk folder, truth be told, that actually frustrates me a little bit. And I then I just go into junk folder and I'm seeing it's coming from someone that I know I speak to them on a regular basis. Right, I'll just quickly respond to this email. I'll pay that invoice or I'll click on that link. And I'm actually, if anything, less likely to be looking for other red flags inside of that email. And it would be much more likely, almost in a sense, for me to actually distribute ransomware or pay the wrong amount, paying money to the wrong bank account. So really what we want to be doing is we want to move this domain. We want to get to that P=reject stage, because we are telling recipients in the event that SPF and DKIM fail, the wax seal and the invite list, if they both fail, then I want you to bounce that email, because that will be coming from an attacker. But I want you to deliver anything that's coming legitimately from me. So to visualize what is actually happening here. So let's say, as an example, so I'm from Brigantia, our domain is brigantia.com, and let's say I'm sending an email to you. So we've got a legitimate email that's coming from, say, my Microsoft 365 environment, that's going into your environment, and your environment is then going, okay, we've received this email from brigantia.com. What do we do now? And the next step that it does is it has a look at where our domain is hosted in our DNS, our domain name system. That is where the invite list, it's where the wax seal, it's where the DMARC is all hosted. It's all in there. So what this essentially means is that when I'm looking at the DNS or whether what your environment is doing is it's looking to see, okay, has Brigantia told me that they use Microsoft 365? Is Microsoft 365 on that invite list? Yes, it is. Fantastic. So we can trust that email because it's come from that Microsoft 365 environment. It will also check to see, is there a wax seal on that email? Yes, there is. Is it broken? No, it's not. Fantastic. That email is fully trusted. But if we get an impersonated email coming from brigantia.com and it's coming into your environment, again, your environment is then having a look at our DNS. It's having a look at our at the brigantia.com DNS because it's coming from Brigantia. So what's actually happening here is it's then going, okay, well, where is this email coming from? Is it coming from Microsoft or Salesforce or MailChimp or Sage? Well, no, it's not. It's coming from some random Russian or Chinese or South American tools. So actually, it's going to fail because that email is not coming from an invite list. The other side of it is that there's not going to be a wax seal on that letter. Threat actors don't add wax seals, but even if they did, with the way that it works, the moment that they would send that out, the wax seal would break, meaning that now your environment has received an email from Brigantia that is failing the SPF and it's failing the DKIM checks. What that therefore means is your environment's going, okay, well, now what do I do with this email? But at Brigantia, we publish that P=reject that we saw just a second ago. So I'm telling your environment, do not deliver that email. It's coming from a threat actor and it was not to be trusted. But we saw earlier on that the legitimate emails were being delivered. In both scenarios, whether it's a legitimate email or an impersonated email, a report is then generated. And we want to bring those reports into Sendmarc. Now, you could do this for free. I'm going to be completely transparent. You could do this for free. You could set up a shared mailbox, a DMARC@ email address, and you can bring all those reports back into that email address. But what those reports will look like is this. So this is an example of what one of those reports actually looks like. And we can see, let's be honest, this is not particularly easy to read. So we've got things like in here, well, okay, well, I understand what date range is. So that must mean, when the email is being sent out. But well, hold on a minute. If you have a look at what the date range actually is, I don't recognize that as any sort of date I recognize. What's going on here? So and this is done in, this is actually being fed back to us in what's known as epoch time. In other words, the number of seconds since the 1st of January, 1970. And I don't know that by heart. So I need to understand that in a bit more detail. And again, as we start to go through the data, it's not presenting things in an easy to understand way. So it'll tell us where the email came from, but it's not telling us the exact source. It's not giving us a name of the source. It's giving us the what's known as the IP address, basically what was the location it was sent from. And this, I should mention, is only representative of a single email. At Brigantia, we send about 5,000 emails per week. So to put this into context, if it took me just 1 minute to go through this report that we see here, which actually, if I'm honest, that will take longer than that, but if we just say that I'm very quick about it, it took me a minute, it would take me 85 hours to go through every single one of these reports. I don't have 85 hours a week to go through these reports, and quite frankly, I think I'd go insane if I did. And that's why it's so important that we need to bring those reports into a dashboard so that we can understand exactly what is happening with your outbound emails, so we can not only protect against your domain from being impersonated, but also ensure that your emails are actually being delivered into the recipient's environment. And it's also, I should mention, why Google themselves recommend that you use a third-party tool. Not only do Google recommend this, but Microsoft do as well. It's worth pointing out, Google and Microsoft do not provide a DMARC dashboard. This is not something that they provide themselves. They're not trying to flog their own tools here. They are just saying you need to use a third-party tool because at the end of the day, those reports, they're not really understandable or readable by a human. Okay, a couple of slides and then we'll wrap it up there and have some to go through any questions. So last slide from me. We've got some recent changes that have happened. Stuart mentioned earlier on that there have been some changes coming from Google, Yahoo, and now Microsoft. So back in October 2023, Google and Yahoo announced that you need to have DMARC if you are a bulk sender. And if you are not, if you do not have a bulk, so if you're not a bulk, sorry, let me start again. If you are a bulk sender, but you have no DMARC, then we will put your emails into the junk folder. And that came into force in, I believe it was June 2024. Microsoft at this point were notably missing from this announcement until April the 2nd of this year. On the 2nd of April, they then said, Microsoft came in and said, you need to have a DMARC record in place. Otherwise, we'll put your emails into the junk folder if you are a bulk sender. And that was all fine up until a week before this came into force. So they came into force on the 5th of May. So they only gave people a month's notice. And a week before it came into force on the 5th of May, they then changed what would happen to that email if you did not have DMARC in place. And they changed it from going into the junk folder to straight up being bounced. Now, what they've done by doing this is they've set the precedent that they are happy to give only 1 week's notice for fairly significant changes to email security and email deliverability. And what this really means is we need to get ahead of the curve because Microsoft are likely to turn around and do the same thing again in the not too distant future. And also on top of that, Google and Yahoo, they're going to start making stricter and stricter rules moving forward. And we need to make sure that we stay ahead of that curve. Otherwise, we could have legitimate emails being put into junk folders or being bounced. PCI DSS, and there's a bit of a glitch with my PowerPoint at the moment. It likes to just duplicate DORA, so maybe it's thinking of Bora instead of Dora. But anyway, PCI DSS, some of you on today's call will be familiar with it. Payment card industry security standard questionnaire that you have to fill out basically if you take payment cards. In order to become PCI DSS compliant, you now need to have a DMARC record in place. And on top of that, whilst DORA does not specifically actually talk about DMARC, it's a great way to actually become DMARC compliant utilizing, becoming DORA compliant by using DMARC. DORA, for those unaware, is an EU standard for financial organizations. If you're purely based in the UK, then you don't need to worry about this too much. But if you are dealing with European companies and you're a financial organization or work within the financial services industry, then you need to be DORA compliant. The other side of it is third-party contracts. Now, I talked a little bit earlier on about thinking about your own customers and, what would happen if they got ransomware. And it's worth noting that your customers are getting conscious about this as well. Let's think about the attack on M&S that happened very recently. It was all over the news. It's still in the news, really. And they confirmed the other day that the attack that happened came via a third party. So what big organizations are doing is they are now putting a stronger emphasis on security in their supply chain, because they are realizing that the risk is not necessarily coming inbound direct from a threat actor into their own organization, but it's coming from a third party supplier. And what this means is, and actually I confirmed this with a chief information security officer at a large 60,000 user organization, what they're basically saying is, if we're working with a third party supplier and they do not have DMARC in place, or it's on P equals none, in other words, there's no protection, we are reviewing our relationship with them, and we are actually quite likely to stop our relationship with them because the risk is proven to be too high to have this. We want to move away to someone that presents us with less risk. Think about it as well. If you are trying to win a tender contract and it's between you and another organization, if you have P equals reject and your competition is on P equals none, who presents less risk for the person that's going out to tender? Well, they're going to go with the person that has published in P equals reject. So again, this is looking at things from a business perspective, how this can actually help you win new business beyond just also securing your own domain and helping with email deliverability. And then one final thing, cyber insurance. Some of you, well, most of you on today's call probably be familiar with cyber insurance. Having DMARC in place, we have seen instances where cyber insurance premiums are being reduced by having DMARC set at stronger values, so P equals quarantine or P equals reject. We have seen this start to happen very recently, so worth bearing that in mind. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand back to Stuart to run through Sendmarc and the offering that they can provide.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks, Elliot. And I really appreciate the introduction to DMARC. Really light, informative. I like the analogies you used. Very simple, being an invite to a party and the stamp on it. So thanks for that. Hopefully you enjoyed that part of the presentation, all completed within the length of you drinking a cup of tea or coffee. So I just want to mention the premium service that we offer. So Kuiper are actually offering a per user per month 12-month contract for this service. It is a fully managed service where we work with yourself and Sendmarc to ensure that you are guaranteed a 90-day term when you are fully compliant. So what we will do is work with Sendmarc. There are a couple of caveats to that, but in short, we guarantee that within 90 days of subscribing to this service, you will be fully compliant with your DMARC. And that's a very, very important thing. There is no other provider that actually offers that 90-day guarantee. So that's very, very important. Obviously, we can send you data sheets. We can have further presentations or further exploratory meetings. We would love to set you up with a proof of concept as well, so you can start using it. We can start collating data about your domain and sort of present the findings back to you. Those are a real eye-opener. I know some of the customers who are on this session, you've had calls live with an account manager of ours who are actually showing you a real live spoofing situation with your own domain. So hopefully that has been useful as well. But just to let you know, our team at Kuiper will work with you to manage this service throughout the year to make sure that you're fully compliant and you remain compliant so that the worry completely goes from you and your business. So we take the management of it, we work with you, and we work closely with Sendmarc. So it is 12 months contracts, it is monthly billing, it is done per user per month, but you can pay annually if you wish as well. But just reach out to us, contact us, phone, email, Microsoft Teams for any proof of concept, pricing, and reach out to your account manager. We'll do our best to help you. Are there any questions that anyone has? I know some people shy away. But if there's any questions that any of you got about the solution, any more questions about DMARC and how it works, if you want to add it in the Q&A box, if everyone can see that, give it about 20 seconds. Kerry, I know you've been quietly watching. Is there anything you'd like to add and introduce yourself? Because I'm sure some of the people on this call will be meeting you at some point soon.
Yeah, sure. Nothing to add. I think Elliot, between yourself and Elliot, you covered everything else. But an introduction might be good. I look forward to meeting any customers who want to understand more about, I always say this is like the 10,000 foot view that we get to give during these kinds of webinars, or even during an initial introduction. And the POC allows us really to get into the meat of it and what this means in your own environment, and giving you the opportunity to lift a veil of what is currently a blind spot, right? And it is for most organizations. That's kind of the role that I would play, or that I do play, in terms of running the next kind of conversations. If anyone's interested to dig in a little bit deeper, yeah, excited to do that.
Yeah, lovely. No, thank you, Kerry. So, okay, there we go. Short and sweet today. I don't think we've had any questions, have we, Ryan? Are you checking the Q&As or any questions at all? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, no questions, Jim.
Okay, then. But if anyone does need to, please drop us an email, give us a call. We're always available. Plenty of the team here to help you. But thanks, Kerry, for jumping on. Thank you, Elliot. A really light, informative session, so really appreciate that. And yeah, hope you found this session informative and giving you a bit more of an understanding about DMARC and why it's important. Reach out to us anytime. And just a reminder, a recording will be made available after this webinar finishes, so keep an eye on your inbox. But thanks to everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.